Our next guest is currently on the Encinitas City Council, an estate planning attorney, a wife, a mother of two, and a fourth-generation Cardiff-by-the-Sea resident. Welcome, Catherine Blakespear.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Catherine. It's an honor to have you here today. And the big exciting news is that we understand you are going to be running for the mayor of the city of Encinitas. So with that as a backdrop, tell us what your vision is to help our aging adults live a quality of life in the city of Encinitas.
Well, thank you, and I'm pleased to be here. So thank you for having me on your show.
Awesome.
In preparation for this interview, I looked up how many people over 60 we have in Encinitas, and in fact, it's about 25% of the population, so that's about 15,000 people in Encinitas. And I think seniors' concerns are the same as everybody else in terms of quality of life. And one of the biggest threats to our quality of life in Encinitas, I believe, is our ever-increasing traffic. And so one of the things, it's a really thorny problem, what do you do about traffic? But I think what we can do at the city level is we can make it easier to bike and walk around the city. And that's something that I'm particularly focused on and interested in. And we've already started doing that with projects. We recently completed an undercrossing to go to the beach at Swami's, which is on Santa Fe, and it's wildly popular, makes it safe for people to go across the railroad tracks, it's under the railroad tracks, and also across Highway 101. And so there are a number of projects like that involving biking and walking that we are prioritizing and that I'm very focused on, especially kids walking to school with their grandparents or with their parents, and people being able to walk to get something to eat or walk to the beach. Those are all things that will improve everybody's quality of life.
And does that get implemented through the city planning department, or how do you see that actually logistically coming to fruition?
Well, in some ways, a lot of it comes down to budget. So what do you prioritize funding? And I think that it's always a complicated interplay of having leadership to articulate a vision and also advocating at the right points and understanding how decisions are made. And so it happens technically through the planning department and the engineering department, but it also happens by having a bit of a culture change in terms of what is it that we think is most important in the city to focus our capital improvement projects on.
And we've talked about that briefly, and again, it's such a valuable situation for seniors to have the ability to walk safely in their community. We just talked about Saxony, and I think there is something that's on board in that area across from the YMCA.
Yes, and so sometimes it's not the big projects, it's also the little things like a crosswalk. So across from the YMCA in Encinitas, there are a number of apartment complexes and senior living places, and people say that they will drive 1 block across Saxony, just get in their car and drive across the street because it's so difficult to cross. And that's the kind of thing that I really hate to hear, and I want us to not have a city like that. I want to have a city where you can walk out on the sidewalk and push a button and the lights flash and you can walk across to go to the YMCA. That's one of the reasons people live across from the YMCA. So we have approved that, and it will be funded within the year. It should be built.
Well, that would be fantastic, because you have Seacrest and you have other communities that are along that strip that really could benefit from something like that, where they could walk easily to the Y and take advantage of the opportunities that the Y provides. They call them active aging adults.
Right, absolutely.
So that would be fantastic.
Right.
I know, Patty, you had a question for Catherine.
From an estate planning perspective, with the multi-generational society that we're living in as people live longer, how do you advise families to prepare for that and plan for it?
Yes, well, thank you for that question. And so in addition to being on the City Council, I'm an estate planning attorney, and estate planning is mostly the documents that you need to transition both your assets and your values to the next generation. So that's trusts, wills, powers of attorney, healthcare directives. But a lot of it is also the counseling aspect, the client relationship, and suggesting how people manage things. And one of the things I think is really important is the family conference. So the worst for families, I think, is when they fall apart after mom or dad dies and they end up in a lawsuit. And that's the kind of thing that every family wants to avoid. And so how do you do that? How do you do your best to avoid that happening in your family if you're a senior? And I think it is to be really transparent about what you want to have happen with your assets. And so people sometimes have this idea that everything should always be equal, but the reality is that it can be fair without being equal, because even when we're raising our kids and they're young, they have different health needs or their different education needs, what they spend their time recreationally doing is different. So to say, I would really like the family home to stay in the family and one child to live in it and the other to have the stock account or the savings account, and to articulate that, I think is really important. And just by way of an example, in my family, at our family conferences, we would do them over Thanksgiving because people would come from all over the place to the family home. And my mom, at one point, she said to us, to my sister and I when we were a lot younger, she said, if I pass, I want to make sure that you don't consume any inheritance you get and spend it. I want to make sure that you take care of your grandma and your aunt. That's my very first priority, is to care for and make sure their quality of life stays high. And my sister and I heard that very clearly. And it's something that if kids have never heard that message, that they get an inheritance and they spend it on themselves however they do. So I think it really is an important way to transmit your values to the next generation and make sure that what you want to have happen does happen.
That is really important, because unfortunately a lot of the seniors or aging adults who are older, in their 80s and 90s, the Depression generation, the greatest generation as we call it, didn't share that information. And so a lot of family members are having a hard time because everybody's idea of what's best is very different.
Right. And it's really powerful to hear it straight from mom, because people will reflect on that conversation. Remember when we were all in the living room? And so it is, one of the biggest problems is that people sometimes don't have clarity internally about what they really want to do. And they fear conflict. So they don't want to put it out there with their kids. But in some ways, it's really so much better to just face that and do it than it is to wait for it to unfold after someone passes.
How are you planning on helping ensure that your mom's wishes are fulfilled about helping siblings?
Yes, well, that's an excellent question. There are a lot of different ways to do that. One of them is to set up a special trust to do that. But any choices that you make in estate planning, there are always consequences, whether it has to do with property taxes or income taxes, or sometimes estate taxes if people have quite a bit more money. And so it's important to have a multifaceted approach where you're talking about what you want to have happen and then having the documents that support it, but not also having documents that lock you into something that's inflexible. So there are a lot of things to think about, and especially because you're never sure what order people will die in, especially when they're of the same generation. So it isn't an easy answer to that question.
Going back to this discussion about your vision for the city of Encinitas as mayor, let's talk about housing. We know that's a huge issue. Where do you see that going within the city limits?
Well, housing is tremendously controversial and also very important. And one of the things we talk about at the City Council is how to allow people to age in place and also to live here once they grow up. So people grow up in Encinitas, and it's a higher income community, and they don't find that they're able to afford rent or to afford to buy a house. And so having a mix of housing is a really important part of that, and we are in the midst of updating what's called the housing element, which has to do with what types of housing will we have going into the future. And the big picture is that in California, there's expected to be population growth, and every city is supposed to provide housing for every income level. And so Encinitas is well positioned to provide for the upper income levels, but we need to do more to provide housing for the middle and the lower income levels. And so this housing element update will help us get there. And it will also get us into compliance with our state law. And right now, we are one of only a very few cities that is not currently in compliance. And that's, especially as an attorney, that's something that I think is really important and a value I hold dear. We can't just decide that we're not going to follow certain laws because we don't care to. So it's important philosophically, and it's also important legally that we do this.
Well, Patty and I want to thank you for coming today. It's been an honor to have you here. We'd really like you to sum up your message, because you'll be running for mayor of City of Encinitas. What do you want those voters and the people in the City of Encinitas to hear from you?
Well, I think the bottom line is I think I have the right combination of what the residents in the City of Encinitas want in their mayor, and that is somebody who's pragmatic and practical and listens, someone who has experience, someone who's fiscally responsible and also environmentally focused. And those are the things that are important to me in the city realm. So from the estate planning perspective, I'm always happy to help clients and seniors and families. I do contracts between family members if people want to work out a particularly complicated situation and any type of estate planning. And you are welcome to call me or email me.
Thank you, Catherine. You can see that Senior Stay or Go is all about providing you the resources so that you can live the highest quality of life, whether it's Encinitas or anywhere in San Diego. Don't go anywhere. We have more great guests coming up on Senior Stay or Go TV.
Look around. You'll find a brand new day before you. And simple things that matter most. Friends, family, ocean breezes. This is Wesley Palms, a full-service retirement community. Look ahead. A modern expression of home is coming to life here. The all-new patio homes, living spaces designed around you. We call it 360-degree living. Reserve your new patio home today.